When you picture the Dominican Republic, your mind probably fills with images of pristine white sand beaches, crystal clear turquoise waters, and lush swaying palm trees. It's a vision of paradise, a popular escape for millions of tourists from North America and Europe looking to unwind and soak up the Caribbean sun. But beneath this idyllic surface lies a dark and troubling reality that most vacation brochures will never mention. This reality is known as sex tourism, an industry where people travel to other countries with the primary purpose of paying for sexual services. It's a complex and often devastating phenomenon that turns a tropical haven into a marketplace for human bodies, fueled by global inequality and local desperation. The Dominican Republic has, for a long time, been one of the world's most notorious hotspots for this kind of travel. The reasons are a grim combination of factors. It's relatively cheap to get to, the cost of living is low, and there's a perception that rules are lax and everything is for sale. For some travelers, the allure isn't just the sun and sea, but the easy availability of commercial sex, often at prices far lower than in their home countries. This transactional tourism preys on the vulnerabilities of the local population, creating a shadow economy where the lines between choice, coercion, and outright exploitation become dangerously blurred, leaving a trail of broken lives in its wake. This isn't your typical story of a vacation gone wrong. It's a story about a system, a deeply entrenched industry that has become tragically normalized in many tourist zones across the country. It involves foreign visitors who see local people not as individuals with hopes and dreams, but as commodities to be consumed. It's also about the local men, women, and tragically children who find themselves caught in this web. They are often driven by circumstances most of us can barely imagine, making choices born from a lack of other options. Understanding sex tourism in the Dominican Republic means looking past the postcard-perfect scenery and confronting the uncomfortable truths about power, poverty, and the human cost of paradise. Throughout this exploration, we will peel back the layers of this complicated issue. We will examine why this beautiful island nation became such a prominent destination for sex tourists and look at the sheer scale of the industry. We'll hear about the places where this trade flourishes in plain sight, from bustling beach towns to dimly lit bars. We will delve into the most heartbreaking aspect of this crisis, the exploitation of minors. And we will try to understand the forces at play, the traffickers who profit, the corrupt systems that allow it to continue, and the brave individuals and organizations fighting for a better, safer future for all Dominicans. To truly grasp the crisis, we need to look at the numbers, and they are staggering. While it's incredibly difficult to get precise data on an industry that operates in the shadows, even the most conservative estimates paint a grim picture. The International Labour Organization has suggested that between 25,000 and 35,000 women are involved in the sex trade in the Dominican Republic. However, local organizations like the Center for Integral Orientation and Investigation, which work on the ground, believe the real figure is much higher, possibly reaching between 60,000 and 100,000 individuals. This isn't a small hidden problem, it's a massive parallel economy that operates alongside the legitimate tourism industry. This shadow economy generates a significant amount of money, which is a major reason why it's so hard to dismantle. For the tourists who participate, the prices are shockingly low. A sexual encounter might cost as little as $40, a price that reflects the deep economic disparity between the visitor and the provider. Some tourists even purchase all-inclusive sex tourism packages before they ever leave their home countries, with deals costing up to $4,000 that bundle flights, hotels, and guaranteed access to women. This commercialization turns human beings into just another part of the vacation package, listed alongside snorkeling trips and buffet dinners, stripping them of their dignity and humanity. The visibility of the industry is another indicator of its scale. In many tourist areas, it's not hidden away in secret back alleys. It's right out in the open. Seaside villages and popular resort towns like Sosua and Boca Chica have become infamous for it. You can see it in certain bars, on specific stretches of beach, and in clubs where older foreign men are openly surrounded by young Dominican women. The normalization is perhaps the most shocking part. It has become so ingrained in the fabric of these communities that it's often seen as just another part of the local economy, a sad but accepted way of life for many. What makes this industry even more pervasive is its connection to the globalized world. The Dominican Republic's proximity to the United States and its well-established travel routes to Europe make it an easily accessible destination. The internet has also played a huge role in its growth. Websites, forums, and encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp are used to advertise services, share reviews of sex workers, and even arrange for victims of trafficking to be delivered to clients. This digital footprint shows how the trade has adapted and modernized, making it both easier for perpetrators to operate and harder for law enforcement to track and stop them. At the very heart of the Dominican Republic's sex tourism industry is a single powerful force: poverty. For so many people trapped in this trade, it is not a choice made freely but a decision born of desperation. In a country where meaningful employment opportunities are scarce and wages are painfully low, the allure of earning quick money from tourism can be overwhelming. A person working in the sex trade might earn between $600 and $800 in just 2 weeks. To put that in perspective, that amount is roughly what someone might make in 2 full months working a minimum wage job in a factory or a shop. When you're struggling to feed your family or keep a roof over your head, that difference is life-changing. This economic vulnerability creates a fertile ground for exploitation. Foreign tourists are seen as a source of immense wealth. They can pay more for sexual services than local clients, making them the preferred clientele. This dynamic establishes a deeply unequal power relationship right from the start. The tourist holds all the cards, the money, the passport, and the ability to leave at any moment. The local individual, on the other hand, is often trapped by their circumstances, dependent on the transaction for their survival. This isn't a simple business deal. It's a reflection of a global economic imbalance playing out in the most personal and intimate way imaginable. The cycle of poverty often begins in childhood and is passed down through generations. Many of the women and men in the sex industry come from backgrounds of extreme hardship, with limited access to education and few paths to a stable career. In some tragic cases, families living in abject poverty may even become complicit in their children's exploitation, seeing it as the only way to survive. They might turn a blind eye or, in the most horrific instances, be manipulated by traffickers into selling their own children. This is not a sign of moral failure, but a symptom of a society where the safety nets have completely broken down, leaving people to make impossible choices. This desperation is what makes individuals so susceptible to the false promises of traffickers and pimps. They prey on the dreams of a better life, offering what seems like an easy way out of poverty. They might promise a good job in a hotel or a restaurant in a bustling tourist town, only to later force the person into prostitution. The initial lure is always tied to economic hope, the chance to earn money, support loved ones, and escape the daily grind of survival. But this hope is a mirage, and the path it leads to is one of exploitation, trauma, and a cycle of poverty that becomes even harder to break. Sex tourism in the Dominican Republic doesn't operate in a vacuum. It thrives in specific environments, often blending seamlessly with the mainstream tourism industry. The most visible hubs are the coastal towns and resort areas that draw in millions of foreign visitors each year. Places like Sosua, Boca Chica, and parts of Punta Cana have become notorious as epicenters of the trade. On the surface, they look like any other beach destination, filled with hotels, souvenir shops, and restaurants. But after dark, and sometimes even in broad daylight, the nature of the economy shifts, and the transactional side of tourism comes to life in the open. The trade flourishes in a variety of venues, making it both pervasive and difficult to regulate. Bars and dance clubs are primary meeting points where tourists can easily connect with sex workers. In some establishments, the arrangement is overt, with groups of local women and girls waiting for clients. Hotels, too, play a complex role. While many legitimate hotels have strict policies against prostitution, others are complicit, allowing guests to bring unregistered visitors to their rooms with no questions asked. The industry also extends to more private settings, like rental villas and apartments sourced through online platforms like Airbnb, which traffickers can use to house victims and serve clients discreetly. The beaches themselves, the very symbol of a Caribbean vacation, are also part of this landscape. During the day, they are filled with families and sunbathers, but in certain areas, they become marketplaces. Men known as Sanky-Pankies stroll the sands, targeting foreign women for romantic and transactional relationships, while female sex workers might approach male tourists. The line between a casual vacation romance and a commercial transaction is often intentionally blurred. This ambiguity creates a shield for the industry, allowing it to hide in plain sight under the guise of casual interactions and holiday flings. making it harder for authorities to intervene effectively. Even seemingly ordinary places can hide these dark dealings. Investigations have uncovered brothels operating behind the facade of legitimate businesses, like grocery stores or private homes. This adaptability shows how deeply embedded the sex trade is within some communities. Traffickers are constantly evolving their methods, using everything from tour guide services and transportation companies to create a network that delivers victims to clients. It's a system designed to exploit the infrastructure of tourism, turning the very things that make a vacation enjoyable, excursions, private transport and secluded rentals, into tools of exploitation. The paradise you see is not always the paradise that exists. While all forms of sex tourism are exploitative, the most devastating and horrifying aspect is the sexual abuse of children. This is not a rare or isolated part of the problem in the Dominican Republic. It is a pervasive and deeply rooted crisis. The numbers are, honestly, just heartbreaking. A report by the International Labour Organization estimated that a shocking 60% of the country's prostitutes first entered the industry when they were minors. This means that for a majority of individuals in the sex trade, their exploitation began before they were legally adults, a time when they should have been protected, in school, and allowed to be children. The vulnerability of minors makes them prime targets for predators and traffickers. The same poverty that drives adults into the sex trade hits children even harder. They are often lured with promises of gifts, money, or a better life, things that seem incredibly appealing to a child living in hardship. Traffickers are masters of deception, grooming their victims over time, sometimes with the help of technology. They use social media and messaging apps to build a false sense of trust before trapping them. In 2021, official records showed that 23 out of 29 formally identified sex trafficking victims were children, a statistic that likely represents only the tip of the iceberg. The age of consent in the Dominican Republic is 18, which means any sexual act with a minor is a serious crime. Yet, the commercial sexual exploitation of children has become tragically normalized in some communities. Foreign pedophiles and sex tourists travel to the country specifically seeking out minors, believing they are less likely to face consequences than in their home countries. This demand from abroad creates a market for stolen innocence. Cases have emerged of traffickers using digital catalogs to advertise children to clients, treating them like objects on a menu. The system is chillingly organized and designed to profit from the worst form of human cruelty. The long-term consequences for these children are catastrophic. They suffer profound physical and psychological trauma that can last a lifetime, including depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and substance abuse issues. Their education is cut short, destroying their chances for a future outside of the sex trade. They are robbed of their childhood, their trust in others, and their sense of self-worth. The fight against child sex tourism is not just about enforcing laws. It's about saving lives and breaking a cycle of abuse that threatens to destroy the future generation of an entire nation. The fight is for their right to simply be kids. The recruitment of victims into the Dominican sex trade is a calculated process of deception and coercion, and it is the modern face of slavery. Traffickers are skilled manipulators who know exactly how to exploit a person's vulnerabilities. Their methods often begin with a false promise, a lie tailored to the victim's deepest desires. For a young woman from a rural village with no job prospects, they might offer a position as a waitress or a hotel cleaner in a popular tourist city like Punta Cana or Santo Domingo. For someone dreaming of a life abroad, they might promise a visa and a well-paying job in another country. Once the victim takes the bait, the trap is sprung. Upon arrival in the new city, their identification documents, like their passport or national ID card, are often confiscated. They are told they owe a large debt for their transportation, housing and food, a debt that is impossible to repay. Suddenly, the promised job disappears, and they are forced into prostitution to pay back their trafficker. They are isolated from their families, controlled through threats of violence against them or their loved ones, and trapped in a cycle of debt bondage. This is not a job. It is captivity. Traffickers have adapted their methods to the modern age, using technology to expand their reach and evade capture. They use social media to scout for and groom potential victims, creating fake profiles to build relationships and gain their trust. Encrypted apps like WhatsApp are used for logistics, to communicate with clients, share photos of victims, and arrange for their delivery to hotels or private residences. They also exploit the tourism sector's loopholes, using legitimate platforms for booking short-term rentals to create temporary discreet brothels that are difficult for police to track. This digital sophistication makes the network more resilient and harder to dismantle. The trafficking networks are often complex and hierarchical. At the top are the ringleaders who orchestrate the operations and reap the largest profits. Below them are recruiters who find and groom the victims, and enforcers who use intimidation and violence to keep them in line. Sometimes the recruiters are former victims themselves, trapped in the system and forced to lure others in to improve their own situation. This cruel structure perpetuates the cycle of exploitation, turning victims into perpetrators. The entire system is built on profiting from human misery, and it operates with a chilling efficiency that mirrors any other criminal enterprise. On paper, the Dominican Republic has laws designed to combat human trafficking and protect minors. The age of consent is 18, and any sexual activity with a person younger than that is illegal. There is also a 2003 anti-trafficking law in place. However, the reality on the ground is that this legal framework is weak, outdated, and poorly enforced. A major flaw in the existing law is that it is inconsistent with international standards. For instance, it often requires prosecutors to prove that force or coercion was used, even in cases involving child victims, which creates an unnecessary and difficult burden of proof that allows many perpetrators to walk free. Making matters worse is the pervasive issue of corruption, which cripples the justice system from the inside. There are numerous reports of complicity among officials, including police officers and even military personnel, who are supposed to be enforcing the law. Instead of protecting victims, some corrupt officers exploit them. Sex workers are often forced to pay bribes to police to avoid arrest or harassment. One report from El País English noted that bribes could be as high as $25, a significant amount for someone in their position. This corruption creates a climate of impunity, where traffickers and sex tourists believe they can act without fear of consequences. The results of this broken system are evident in the conviction rates, which are shockingly low. In 2022, a country with tens of thousands of people in the sex trade saw only 6 convictions related to the industry, 4 for sex trafficking and 2 for pimping. This is not a reflection of a lack of crime, but a catastrophic failure of the justice system to hold criminals accountable. When a brothel owned by a politician was discovered to be exploiting 11 minors and 6 adults, it highlighted just how high up the corruption can go. As long as those in power are complicit, meaningful change remains out of reach. Efforts to reform this broken system have stalled. A new, more comprehensive anti-trafficking bill was drafted to align the country's laws with international standards and provide better protections for victims. This new bill would have been a major step forward. However, due to political controversy and pushback, the bill was withdrawn in early 2023. This setback was a devastating blow to advocates and survivors who have been fighting for years for stronger laws and better enforcement. Without a robust legal framework and a true commitment to rooting out corruption, the cycle of exploitation and impunity will continue unabated. For those who manage to escape the grip of sex trafficking, the ordeal is far from over. The journey to recovery is a long and arduous road, filled with immense physical and psychological challenges. Survivors are left to grapple with deep-seated trauma from the abuse they endured. Many suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and a shattered sense of self-worth. The constant fear, violence, and dehumanization they experienced leaves invisible scars that can take years, if not a lifetime, to heal. Rebuilding a life after such profound betrayal and violation requires incredible strength and resilience. Unfortunately, the support available to survivors in the Dominican Republic is critically limited. The entire country has only one official government-run shelter, specifically for victims of sex trafficking, and its capacity is just 24 people. This is a drop in the ocean compared to the sheer number of individuals who need help. With tens of thousands of people trapped in the sex trade, the vast majority of survivors have nowhere to turn for safe housing, medical care, or psychological support. They are often left to fend for themselves, which puts them at high risk of being re-traumatized or even re-trafficked. The lack of resources is compounded by intense social stigma. In many communities, survivors are not seen as victims of a horrific crime, but are instead blamed and shamed for their past. They are often ostracized by their families and friends, making it nearly impossible to reintegrate into society. This isolation deepens their emotional wounds and makes recovery even more difficult. Finding stable employment is another major hurdle, as their past can follow them, and a lack of education or work experience locks them out of legitimate job opportunities. Without a support system, many feel they have no choice but to return to the very industry that destroyed them. In the face of this systemic failure, the burden of care has fallen largely on the shoulders of non-governmental organizations and grassroots movements. Groups like Save the Children and local community organizations work tirelessly to provide the services the government does not, offering counseling, legal aid, and vocational training. In a powerful display of resilience, some survivors have even formed their own support networks. They have become advocates, using their voices to raise awareness, share their stories, and fight for the rights of others still trapped in the trade. Their bravery is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to find light in the darkest of places. Despite the overwhelming scale of the problem, there are dedicated individuals and organizations fighting back against the darkness of sex tourism in the Dominican Republic. This fight is being waged on multiple fronts, from grassroots activism and survivor support to international pressure and law enforcement cooperation. These efforts, while often underfunded and facing immense obstacles, represent crucial flickers of hope in a very bleak landscape. They are driven by the unwavering belief that every person deserves to live with dignity and that a future free from exploitation is possible. Local NGOs are on the front lines of this battle every single day. Organizations on the ground provide essential life-saving services that the state often fails to deliver. They run outreach programs in high-risk communities, educating young people about the dangers of trafficking and teaching them how to recognize the deceptive tactics of recruiters. They also provide direct support to victims and survivors, offering everything from emergency shelter and medical care to legal assistance and psychological counseling. Their work is hands-on, deeply personal, and absolutely critical for helping individuals escape the trade and begin the long process of healing and rebuilding their lives. The fight is also being supported by the international community. Foreign governments and global bodies are providing funding and technical assistance to bolster the Dominican Republic's anti-trafficking efforts. For example, the Spanish Agency for Development Cooperation allocated €600,000 for the period of 2018 to 2025, specifically for projects aimed at combating this issue. Furthermore, law enforcement agencies in other countries, particularly the United States, are taking action. They have begun prosecuting their own citizens for sex crimes committed in the Dominican Republic, sending a clear message that a vacation is not a license to break the law, and that there are consequences for preying on vulnerable children abroad. Perhaps the most powerful force for change comes from the survivors themselves. After enduring unimaginable trauma, some have found the strength to become fierce advocates. By sharing their stories, they are shattering the silence and stigma that have allowed this industry to thrive for so long. They speak to community groups, meet with policymakers, and work with journalists to expose the brutal reality of the sex trade. Their voices are authentic, compelling, and impossible to ignore. They are transforming their pain into power, demanding justice not only for themselves but for all those who are still suffering in silence, ensuring their experiences fuel the fight for a safer future. Creating a future where the Dominican Republic is known for its beauty and culture, not for sex tourism, requires a comprehensive and sustained effort from all levels of society. The path forward is not simple, but it is clear. First and foremost, the nation's legal framework must be strengthened and rigorously enforced. This begins with passing the stalled anti-trafficking bill to align Dominican law with international standards, ensuring that child victims are automatically protected without needing to prove coercion. But new laws are meaningless without a genuine commitment to rooting out the corruption that paralyzes the justice system and allows criminals to act with impunity. Economic empowerment is the most powerful tool for prevention. We must address the root cause of this exploitation poverty. This means investing in education and creating sustainable, dignified employment opportunities, especially for women and young people in marginalized communities. When people have viable alternatives, when they can earn a living wage, support their families, and see a future for themselves that doesn't involve selling their bodies, they are far less vulnerable to the false promises of traffickers. A thriving, inclusive economy is the best defense against exploitation, as it gives people the power of real choice. There also needs to be a fundamental shift in the tourism industry itself. Hotels, tour operators, and online rental platforms must be held accountable for their role in facilitating the sex trade. This includes implementing strict policies against prostitution, training staff to recognize the signs of trafficking, and establishing clear protocols for reporting suspicious activity to the authorities. Tourists also have a critical role to play. We must raise awareness among travelers about the dark reality of sex tourism, encouraging them to be responsible visitors who support ethical businesses and report any signs of exploitation they witness. Paradise should not come at the cost of human dignity. Ultimately, building a safer tomorrow is a shared responsibility. It requires the Dominican government to protect its citizens, the international community to offer support and hold perpetrators accountable, and a civil society that continues to advocate for the vulnerable. It means expanding survivor support services to ensure that everyone who escapes has access to the care they need to heal and rebuild. The road ahead is long, but by working together to address the legal, economic, and social factors that fuel this trade, we can begin to dismantle this industry of exploitation, piece by piece, and restore the promise of paradise for everyone.